He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going to delve into the Flatwoods Monster of West Virginia. Before we get into that, however, I want to do one shout out here to Sheldon over at the Nicola Valley Bigfoot podcast. At the time of writing these notes that I took, Reuben and I have now been to the Nicola Valley podcast, or Bigfoot conference, that took place in Merritt, British Columbia. And we're both going to be recording a follow-up episode of our time at the conference and what information was shared and just in general how awesome it was. We're going to do that this week, and we're going to put that up on our feeds next week, so you'll be able to hear all about it. We got lots of photos. We talked to people. It was a passionate experience. A little Easter egg, I will say, on the note of it being powerful, just to see and hear everyone share their own personal experiences and knowledge with the guest speakers. I took many notes, picked up some cool mementos from the vendors that were there. And just being around almost 300 people that were curious witnesses or skeptics, with Reuben there too, was just an all-around dang good time. And I will also say that the final speaker, Judy Carroll, was my absolute favorite. I feel like she completely captured the audience's attention in a very captivating and enlightening way. We also got to meet Sheldon, who was, again, the host of this wonderful event. And I sincerely insist you visit Sheldon's podcast page, the Nicola Valley Bigfoot podcast. He has a great show. So without further ado, let's dive into this. So this cryptid has a few alternative names, such as the Braxton County Monster, Braxy, Phantom of Flatwoods, and hence some of those names. Braxton County, of course, is located in West Virginia, United States. Now, it's worth noting how eerily similar this creature is to the Mothman, and this is something that Reuben and I have discussed many times prior. But where did this begin? Well, it started in 1952, September 12th at 7:15 p.m. There were two brothers, Edward and Fred May, and they were with their friend Tommy here, when all of a sudden, they spotted a luminous object that was crossing the sky, and it seemed like it had landed on the property of a G. Bailey Fisher, and he was a nearby local farmer. So the boys returned home to explain this to Kathleen May, and she was joined by Neil Nunley, Ronnie Shaver, and a West Virginia National Guardsman, Eugene Lemon. And together, they all ventured out with the boys to Fisher's farm simply to investigate. Now, when they arrived at the top of the hill, Neil had reported to have seen a flashing red light, and so when the National Guardsman, Eugene Lemon, shined his light into that direction, that is when they saw it. A tall humanoid figure with a red circular face and a pointed hood-like shape surrounding it. Now, in further detail, after they returned and reported this to local authorities, this creature was 10 feet tall. Its head was more shaped like a spade with a dark metallic-like dress. Its hands were twisted and clawed, and its eyes had an orange glow to them. They also reported that it was levitating and was making hissing sounds at them. Following the incident, a group member experienced throat irritation, vomiting, and nausea, which all persisted for a few days at least. And while in many cases of inexplainable encounters, symptoms similar to this are quite common after. And in this case, it was mostly deemed as side effects of hysteria. And hysteria is basically a very powerful, uncontrollable amount of emotion or excitement that yields these uncomfortable and unpredictable results of puking and nausea and everything like that. Now, while authorities did go back to the site and investigate further, it appeared that nothing was found to back up the group's reports. And we're going to touch upon that later because there's a little bit more there to discuss. So what do we know about this area? West Virginia already has a multitude of reports coming out of, again, mysterious cryptids and unusual sightings. But specifically Braxton County, this area resides in the central part of West Virginia. Having been established in 1836, it was named after Carter Braxton, who was one of the original signers of the United States Declaration of Independence. Now, it's worth noting as well that the county is largely rural, with a population of around 14,500 people, and note that's of the 2020 population census. And their economy is primarily based on agriculture, forestry, and tourism. So when I say largely rural, again, it's just lots of like smaller communities all spaced out, not really like big hub building cities like in British Columbia. We have like a Vancouver, BC, and we have Victoria, stuff like that. West Virginia is home to several national parks, but one in particular I want to focus on is the Monongahela National Forest. Now, this park is the closest to Braxton County, and upon doing some research, it actually boasts a significant amount of cryptid sightings. Of course, no surprise there. If you're a returning listener, then I'm sure you already know that I have a very skeptical approach to national parks. I do believe that, again, if you're new, there's a lot of interesting things that are taking place in there that I feel that we are not supposed to be well informed on. I attribute that greatly to a lot of the missing disappearances that occur with national parks. Again, I digress, though. That's another topic. A historian by the name of Glenn Lau from Fairmont, West Virginia, had theorized that indigenous peoples invented tales of monsters that lurked in the Monongahela area simply to scare off Europeans from their encampments. This is definitely plausible, but as much as it is like a brilliant tactic, but why invent something new when so many cultures have already pre-existing legends and creatures affiliated with them? It'll foreshadow to the Bigfoot conference when I was there that one of the guest speakers was talking about how, let's say, not settlers, but British swing into China and they start hearing about locals talking about, oh, there's these big bears that are black and white out and eating bamboo out there in the woods. Like, oh, no, you're joking. That's not true. How can that be? Sure enough. And they discovered it. They didn't discover it right away, but they definitely did discover the panda out there. And that is very interesting because, again, like this, you could attribute that and assume that, hey, maybe these locals are simply stating these as stories to scare you off. But like I said, there are cultures that have these pre-existing awarenesses to these things. And that is something that you should take into consideration when you are forming or theorizing at least these creatures and these stories and this information that is being relayed. Now, in 1969, Glenn Lau wrote about a river monster that lives in the national park called the Agua. Now, I'm detouring here a little bit, but bear with me. And I quote, "The Agua was together a mythical beast, used by the Indians as a threat against the settlers, then used later by the settlers, especially traders, soldiers, and early visitors in the western wilderness, to impress folks back home. Easterners who were anxious to believe in any wild tale concerning things, people, and events that had to do with the land of deepest mysteries. The Monongahela, Ohio country." End quote. This is from Glenn's book, Now and Long Ago. Now, my perspectives are not your perspectives. We have to take our own position and gather our own research to make informed decisions. So while this individual is absolutely eons more knowledgeable than myself in the history of West Virginia, going back to 1969, the mentality was different. As much as people were to be bewildered and believe in these crazy cryptid stories, people were just as dismissive. Moving on, though, since we mentioned it, I'll give some more context on the Agua. So it's a Monongahela legend, and I hope I am pronouncing that correctly, an uncommon animal that appeared in the 1700s and was cited by a young boy who spoke of it in a letter to his parents in what is presently known as Marietta, Ohio. Being an amphibious creature, it resides in water throughout the day, but come night, it actually heads onto land to hunt. Its main food source is deer, and is reported to lay in deer paths quietly until a deer passes over or nearby it. Immediately, the Agua grabs the deer, using its tail to entangle it, which is reportedly 15 feet in length, and pulls the deer back to the water where it drowns it and consumes it. This is interesting because this is not the first water cryptid that I have heard of reportedly going onto land, believe it or not. And you can reference our Loch Ness Monster for this episode, or for that episode. Nessie has sightings of being on land by many of the locals. This national park also has Sasquatch sightings. I had found an encounter where a man and his girlfriend went on, it was a 3-day backpacking trip actually, throughout the Monongahela National Forest. And once they hit day 2, again, it was completely uneventful. But that day 2, they decided that we need to start to begin our return trek. And upon their crossing, the gentleman noticed this large dark brown object that moved directly in front of him. It went straight into a thicket of pines on his left. This is about 90 feet directly ahead of him in his field of vision. There was no sound. It was quicker than a blink of an eye, but the shape of the head, the shoulders and arms, as well as how it ran like a human, just trying to stay low, those were all like red flags for him. And they didn't run into any other people for miles. Like, this is a long trek. So his girlfriend did not see it. He saw it, and this only kind of expedited their trek back to get out of the area. So I appreciate you bearing with me for that little side tangent of cryptids. And I always think it's important to circle around and cover the abnormalities that may or may not have a relation to our main cryptid, especially because this is a national park. There is clearly previous notions and stories that are involved here of unexplainable occurrences. And who knows, maybe our Flatwoods Monster kind of took a detour and skedaddled over there. But again, that's totally just based off of absolutely nothing. Speaking of Flatwoods Monster, let's get back into this, touching back onto our 1952 introduction of this cryptid. After the sighting, there was a local newspaper publisher called Lee Stewart. And I quote, "Those people were the most scared people I have ever seen," end quote. Stewart himself went to the sighting location. He was packing a shotgun. I don't blame him. He wanted to see what had happened. And of course, found no evidence like we talked about earlier, but stuck to his claim that, and I quote, "people don't make up that kind of story that quickly," end quote. But of course, you have doubters. The state police deduced that it was reports of hysteria, like we mentioned prior. And again, they did examine the area. And while no sightings of any abnormalities appeared to have taken place, we have a UFO writer called Gray Barker. He conducted tape recording interviews and detailed that the cryptid was approximately 10 feet tall, had that round blood red face, and a dark black-green body, small claw-like hands, like mentioned earlier, and that prominent ace-shaped head. There was also a report of a pungent mist that was smelled in the area by the group. Skid marks were also claimed to have been found in the area. This was a little bit more trickier to find more solid information on, as this was heavily attributed to UFO activity by UFO enthusiast groups. So it's kind of hard to place that and where exactly we want to feel on that bit of information. But with all this belief and doubt, you also have a component of fear, not from the cryptid. We're talking 1952, the Cold War was ongoing, the Communist Party is causing much of an uproar and fear in North America. So when unidentified objects and crafts get sighted in the sky, that can cause a very prominent degree of concern, not only for locals, but the Air Force as well. But let's jump ahead a little bit. Looking at the year 2000, we have a man named Joe Nickel, and he's from the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry. So he came forward with the conclusion that essentially what was seen in the sky that night and reported by the witnesses on September 12th was basically just a meteor. As reports are shown, there were 3 other states, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, that all have witnesses that claim to have seen this same object coming down. As for the red light, well, it seems like that was deduced as most likely being an aircraft navigation or hazard beach, and the creature that appeared, well, which at this time has now displayed a prominent resemblance to an owl in terms of its facial features. And if you look up barn owls, for example, you'll see that spade-like head and the claw-like hands, so to speak, I guess referring mostly to like their claws, their talons. It's worth noting that Nichols' conclusions were shared by a variety of other investigators, including Air Force members. So, consensus. While it has similar attributes to the Mothman, information about this cryptid is very slim. In fact, when I was exploring this, it did remind me somewhat of the Dover Demon, and just in how one-off this experience was and how limited information is that's available and how it's really just taken off. This cryptid really reminds me as well as the Ogopogo in a sense, whereas I guess some people still claim that they still see the Ogopogo, but it's really turned into a large commercial venture. There are reports of people that when I say reports, I don't mean witnesses. I mean reports of people that do not believe in this, but they are advertising merchandise and capitalizing on the capital to be gained from having a local legend, a local cryptid like this, which people love this kind of stuff. People come here to Kelowna and they swoop in and they're buying all their Ogopogo trinkets. I am susceptible for this too, because if I'm at a museum and I see Bigfoot merchandise, I love to just kind of poke around and explore it. And there's something about it. But in this case, there's people that are just capitalizing and marketing off of this cryptid. And you don't have to believe in it, but clearly a lot of these people don't. Now, I'm a person that does attribute owls, touching on this again, an extraterrestrial as a semi-hand-in-hand occurrence. And you can learn about that on previous episodes on our feeds, where me and Reuben actually discuss that when people are waking up in the middle of the night, they see an owl. And is that some sort of projection? Is that something that they intentionally want you to be seeing because it can be a little bit more calming as opposed to seeing an actual unknown entity? Who knows? And West Virginia is indeed a prominent home to barn owls year-round. Albeit still rare to sometimes see, they are commonly found in open fields, pastures, grasslands, row crops, orchards, and vineyards. So they do reside there. Could that have been the explanation for this? Again, I can't say. But these individuals claim to have seen something 10 feet tall. Last I checked, barn owls do not get that big. The glowing eyes, well, that is very interesting too. But when you're in a state of what is deduced hysteria, then maybe your brain is playing that trick on you. But it's tricky to say. The one thing I do find intriguing is that when you are alone in these situations, your mind can create scenarios that did or did not occur during a situation that shouldn't exist, dealing with something that shouldn't technically be real. But in groups, this can sometimes also apply, of course, but I do lean more into the notion that in groups, when you interview them individually, you can weed out unique details and see how many things cross-reference and reaffirm each other's claims. And I've talked about that many a time before, where people see Bigfoot, people see other cryptids, and when they have, maybe it's different when you're in a bigger group, but you have that one person with you and it just reaffirms you like, oh, hey, yeah, this was like da-da-da-da-da. And a lot of the cases, people don't want to talk about it, which is totally fair, because it shakes your whole belief up when you see that whatever it is that's not supposed to be real. And I believe I've talked about this before on previous episodes, but I was doing a midnight launch for a video game. I was waiting outside the store. We were lined up outside. There was about 30 of us. It was a whole group of people, and all of us had our backs to the wall. There's about 10 of us along this side of the wall. Many of us were just kind of looking up, like, what are you doing? It's midnight, or waiting, almost midnight. It's late, it's dark out, it's cold. You're just kind of just chilling, not much going on. And all of a sudden, these incredible lights tracked across the sky. And I will never forget it for the rest of my life, but it moved in the most inexplainable way. Not a plane, not even a satellite. It was so different. And it was a clear sky. And I didn't believe what I saw. It happened so quickly. And I turned and immediately looked at other people who looked up and they were like, oh, did you see that? Yeah. And it was like, okay, what I saw really happened. I can take that and reaffirm my position that I did see something. Again, you can weed out those details and interview people individually, cross-reference them. But I just think that's a very important thing to remember. And maybe it does kind of get diluted a little bit when you have too many people, too many witnesses. Yeah. To each his own. I'm rambling at this point. Let me know what you think of this cryptid. because I think that there's a lot more to be gained from this. And I hope I was able to provide a very cool baseline of this creature, because between its hissing, which owls do kind of do a screech, this creature kind of like coming at them a little bit, and they turned and they ran, got the heck out of there. The pungent mist. There's so many weird different things that are involved with this area and just this cryptid that it leaves me wondering. So with all that, I will have a newspaper article attached to the blog via our website, so you can check it out there of the original event. But yeah, that's everything for this episode. So remember to tune in next week to Reuben and I talking about the Bigfoot conference and the guest speakers. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited to dive in and get more of Reuben's thoughts and on what he thought of everything, and share them all with you. So you can find more Cryptid Clues on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and our Patreon, where you can get ad-free episodes. And if you ever want to just send us an email or a question, cryptidclues@gmail.com. So remember, everyone, take care and stay safe.